This chilling list begins with Israel Keys in at number 10. Israel Keys was captured in October of 2012 because he was suspected of kidnapping and murdering a teenage girl from Alaska. While he was interrogated for hours and hours, he revealed a lot to the investigators.
Smart, I would let them come to me. Just remote area.
He admitted to committing a bunch of violent crimes that started as early as 1996. He confessed to killing at least 8 people and sexually violating them. He was being held in custody as he waited for his trial to start, but he committed suicide in prison. He left a suicide note under his bed that said, "Ode to murder," but it didn't give police insight into the other killings that he confessed to. Up next, number 9, we have Edward Edwards.
Murder committed there in Geauga County, and I'm responsible for it, and I am wanting the death penalty.
Between the years of 1977 and 1996, he murdered at least 5 people, but it is suspected that he killed several more. There are even theories that link Ed Edwards to a variety of famous crimes. He was even suspected of being the Zodiac Killer, or that he was the Golden State Killer. He was sentenced to death after he confessed to killing at least 5 people, but he died in prison of natural causes a month later. But as you saw from the clip, he wanted the death penalty because he couldn't get killing out of his mind. David Zink makes his mark in at number 8.
Look up. She said, "Up where?" I said, "Up there." When she looked up, I broke her neck.
Okay. How did you do that?
Just snapped her with your hands, yeah.
This guy was seriously a sadistic killer. He had confessed to tying a young woman to a tree in a cemetery, breaking her neck, and slicing her spinal cord to ensure that she wouldn't live. Investigators said that this killing was an unspeakable act of violence. So after his confession, he was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to death by lethal injection. In his final statement before death, he said that death by lethal injection is better than spending the rest of your life in prison. He also apologized to the victim's family and said that he hopes his execution will bring them the peace and satisfaction they seek. He was just a twisted and sick individual, and I think I'm glad they gave him the death penalty. Gerard Murray stabs his way into this list at number 7.
Shot once, missed. Shot a second time, hit. He was driving 10-15 miles an hour, so it was rather slow. Ran around the hood of the car. I heard him gurgling, so I shot him again and then shoved him down in the ditch.
Gerard Murray also told the investigators that he wanted to show what it felt like to kill someone, and just hours after he confessed to the brutal murder, he was arrested in 2012. He was charged with first-degree murder after he shot his college classmate, General Sanchez, who was 18 years old at the time. In one of his other statements, he said to the court that he doesn't know when he might hurt someone again, and that he always thinks about hurting someone else. He also told the judge that he doesn't feel any remorse for killing, but he was found not guilty because of insanity. Michael Hernandez brings us to number 6. He was a teenager who was sentenced to life in prison for brutally stabbing one of his classmates, and this occurred at a middle school. He was only 14 years old when he committed the murder, and there was a ton of evidence presented at the trial that showed he was obsessed with becoming a serial killer.
I took the knife out and I proceeded to slit his throat.
Did Jamie say or do anything? Did he put up a struggle?
Yes, he did. He turned around after I did that. He asked me not to kill him.
However, Michael was granted a new sentencing after the US Supreme Court in 2012 banned automatic life terms without the possibility of parole for minors convicted of murder. So what does that mean? His case will be under the judicial review, which means he has the possibility of being released from prison because he would have served a total of 25 years. Okay, brace yourselves for number 5 because we have a very sadistic serial killer.
You don't feel bad about killing anyone?
Not personally, that I've personally done myself, no.
Okay, that was John Hughes. He is a self-confessed serial killer who admitted to police that he killed a truck driver in 2008, but he also later confessed to a reporter that he has killed many more people as well.
People in Mississippi, Missouri, and Ohio.
As far as the murders that I've been a part of, but there's been quite a few.
A dozen?
At least.
20?
Under.
So more around the 15?
somewhere around in there.
Is this real life right now? And if that wasn't scary enough, take a look at this.
I wouldn't advise anyone to, I mean, not unless they want a lion loose in the streets.
Because you kill again.
More than positive.
Well, I think for the safety of society in general, he is going to be locked up for a very long time. Moving things along, in at number 4, we have Ed Kemper.
Back then, in 1972 and 73, unable to live with the fact that I just stabbed to death and cut the throat of an innocent young woman.
This man is responsible for the brutal slaying of 10 people, including his grandparents and even his own mother. He said that he engaged in many acts of necrophilia, and he said that he has even eaten flesh of one of his victims. I mean, this guy needs some serious psychiatric counseling if that would even help him. There's probably no help for this guy. When he was a little boy, he would decapitate his sister's dolls and even stalked his 2nd grade teacher with a knife. And at the age of 10 years old, he killed the family cat, and when he was 13 years old, he did it again. This time he kept pieces of the animals in his closet until his mother found them. Those are some serious red flags, and I think it's safe to say that he was not only insane, but he was deranged as well. Robert Pickton confesses in at number 3.
Make things disappear. I don't need my work. Maybe. That's what I was talking about.
The serial killer Robert Pickton was filmed admitting to 49 murders to an undercover policeman, and he even said that he wanted to do one more to just make it, an even 50. This is sick. In the video you could tell that he was disappointed, that he was just one away from killing 50 people. He actually butchered his victims on his farm located near Vancouver, Canada. He would lure sex workers to his farm with drugs and alcohol before he murdered them and fed the remains to his pigs, or he would grind them up, mix them with animal meat, and then he would sell it to the public. Some of the women were injected with antifreeze while others were stabbed to death. He admitted that the reason why he was arrested was because he was getting too sloppy. Things get even more scarier with this next one. We have the BTK confessions in at number 2.
Put a plastic bag over his head and then some cords and then tighten it.
The BTK killer was Dennis Rader, and BTK stands for blind, torture, or kill, because that was his preferred method of killing his victims. Between the years of 1974 and 1991, he killed 10 people in Kansas, and he was notoriously known for sending taunting letters to the police and newspapers that described the gory details of each of his murders. Well, after a decade-long hiatus, he began sending letters to the police in 2004, which led to his eventual arrest and guilty confession.
Strangling, either the variant broke or he broke his bonds and he jumped up real quick like. I pulled my gun and quickly shot him. I hit him in the head. He fell over. I could see the blood, and as far as I'm concerned, I thought he was down. So
he's currently serving 10 consecutive life sentences at a maximum security prison in Kansas. So just in case this guy was able to live to like 1,000 years old, they got him booked in prison. He's never leaving. And now, topping this freaky list, in at number 1, we have Jeffrey Dahmer.
And his chest was bruised and blood was coming out of his mouth. He was hanging over the side of the bed. And I have no memory of beating him to death, but I must have.
He has a very morbid and long confession list that includes rape, murder, and dismemberment of 17 men and boys from 1978 to 1991. I'm not sure how something like that goes on for that long. He also liked to indulge in necrophilia, cannibalism, and he would preserve the body parts in his freezer. He was sentenced to 16 terms of life imprisonment, but he was beaten to death by a fellow inmate at the Columbia Correctional Institution, and that was back in 1994 because the inmate couldn't stand his sadistic humor. Jeffrey Dahmer is one of the most recognized serial killers because of his gruesome killing techniques. He used to drill holes in the heads of his victims while they were drugged up but still alive, and then he would pour a hydrochloric acid into their brains. Who the heck would think of doing something like this? Well, Jeffrey Dahmer did. Number 10, we have Danta Wright, who is this 17-year-old teenager who admitted to shooting Jordan Klee right in the head. This confession was shocking, and it was right in front of Jordan Clee's mom, which makes it really sad. During this whole conviction and sentencing, Danta had a big smile on his face, and because of that, it almost cost him his plea deal. Because of the plea deal, he got 25 to 53 years in prison. Maybe over that time you can figure out why this wasn't a joking matter and why he shouldn't think that this whole situation was funny. You know, it's funny to shoot someone in the head and then to tell the shocking confession right in front of the victim's mom.
What did you do with that gun and Mr. Jordan Clee?
Shot him.
And where did you shoot him?
On the top of his head.
And did you kill him with that shot?
Yes.
Now at number 9, we have a Marine wife's murder. A former Marine shocked the courtroom during his murder trial when he admitted to strangling the wife of another Marine and pushing her head first down on an abandoned mine shaft in a remote California desert. He initially pleaded not guilty, but after a 2-month search, he said that people have to know what he did. He said he made the decision to kill her because he was controlled by anger. He claimed that she molested one of his family members. Number 8, we have 49-year-old Richard Houghton, who admitted in court that he is a rapist and that he raped a 17-year-old and he knew that she was underage, and he was quite proud of it actually. When he was asked by the prosecutors, did you know that she was a minor? He said yes. He said he lost his head and he actually killed 17-year-old Tara Willenberg, which is just so disturbing. In court, this guy seems so calm, like he just doesn't care. Richard is already a convicted sex offender, so I'm not sure why he's currently out of jail and why he had the opportunity to do this again. Clearly, he was still in contact with the minors. Condolences goes out to this little girl's family, friends, and loved ones. And my condolences goes out to all the victims on this list. Number 7, we have another very shocking confession in court. 33-year-old John Hughes in court admitted to killing a truck driver. John was being convicted for this one murder, but it was shocking to hear that he actually admitted that there were other people as well. He was caught for one, but he admitted that there were many more out there. In court, he was asked, did you feel remorse? And he said no. He said, would he do it again? And John said his brain works differently and he just wants to kill people, and right now he just wants to die. Listen to what he said when he was asked, how many people have you killed?
As far as the murders that I've been a part of, but there's been quite a few.
A dozen?
At least.
20?
Under.
Somewhere around the 15?
Somewhere around in there.
It's always disturbing watching these confessions because you just don't know what is going to be said next. How has this guy killed that many people, and it's just now that he's getting caught? Because he confessed to never not killing people, he will be behind bars for the rest of his life. Alright, number 6, we have a confession from 13-year-old Alex King. This teenager was on trial for murdering his father. Alex killed his father Terry alongside his 14-year-old brother Derek King, who joined in as well on the killing. And they used a baseball bat before setting their home on fire. In court, Alex King made a shocking confession as a plea deal. As a plea deal, the teens received 22 years to life without parole, as well as up to 30 years for arson. Jalel Smith Riley comes into this disturbing and shocking list at number 5. Jalel is 23 years old and he was convicted of attempted robbery that turned into murder. Jalel in court was pleading not guilty during his trial, but something shockingly happened halfway through the sentencing. Jalel out of nowhere confessed to murder and tried to get a plea deal. As soon as Jalel confessed, he broke down crying like crazy in the courtroom. This came as a huge shock because this was a 3-year-old murder case that has been ongoing, and finally he confessed to the crime he committed. The family felt a little bit better and they felt a little bit relieved from this case because they said that this is the first step of healing, but they do want Jalel to get a life sentence.
The Ohio Department of Corrections, mandatory and consecutive underlying offenses, all those counts are left consecutive each other. Colgan Press for time served amount of 349 days.
Number 4, we have 76-year-old Fraser Glenn Miller Jr., who was accused of killing 3 people at Overland Park Jewish Community Center near Kansas City. The court wanted to make sure that Fraser knew what happened and that he killed 3 people in this racist attack. Well, in court, Fraser was just supposed to be present, not testify, he wasn't supposed to speak. Well, on his way out of the courtroom, he said this.
I attacked the Jewish Center of Jews against genocide against white people. I have a right.
These crimes took place in 2014, and right now he's on death row, and he's expected to die by lethal injection. Number 3, we have Lawrence Bittaker. Lawrence, alongside Roy Lewis Norris, were known as the Toolbox Killers after a series of killings and rapes that occurred in a period of 5 months in Southern California back in 1979. Lawrence, when he was caught, confessed to kidnapping, rape, torture, and murder of 5 teenage girls.
Lawrence Bittaker, with an IQ of 138, dragged high school girls into his van, then murdered them by twisting a coat hanger around their throat with a pair of pliers.
Number 2, listen to this.
Shot once, missed. Shot a second time, hit. He was driving 10-15 miles an hour, so it was rather slow. Ran around the hood of the car. I heard him gurgling, so I shot him again and then shoved him down in the ditch.
When this guy was asked what should his prison sentence be, he replied with the death sentence. The officers questioning him asked, well, why is that? And then the killer said, well, it's an eye for an eye. The most shocking thing about this case might be the sentencing. The killer was found not guilty by reasoning of insanity. This is actually a new law in place just weeks before this case happened. So this killer was sentenced to a hospital and not to a prison. Finally, at number 1, we have Steven Sanderson, who admitted to killing his cellmate, but he was very proud of it, and that's why he wanted to confess what he did to the courts and plead guilty to the murder charge. Steven killed Theodore because he said he was a child molester. Steven told the judge that he actually wanted to explain in detail the whole situation.
That night he was trying to justify why he did it, and I just told him to be quiet and he would have to leave in the morning to find a new cell, but he continued to talk about it and try to justify it. So he was a little bit bigger than me, so I got down and I hit him in his face a few times, and when he fell, I wrapped a cord around his neck and I took his life.
I mean, that is just absolutely insane. Is this real life right now? Steven is already serving life without parole. Something tells me that those types of people should be like isolated from everyone else, because what else do these guys have to lose? He already is in life in there, so why not just kill more and more people who bug him?
Coming in at number 10. Look, for those of us in the acting industry, we know it's a tough cookie to crack. Getting an agent is great, but then getting seen by the right people and then finally getting cast, it's a heartbreaking yet addictive biz. But until today, I didn't know just how deadly it could be. In the 1920s, the death of William Desmond Taylor, a silent filmmaker, was found dead in his LA bungalow with a gunshot wound in his back. Unfortunately though, it would be years before the killer would eventually confess on their deathbed. The death of Taylor crushed a lot of dreams and a lot of careers, including the teen star Mary Miles Minter, who according to police had left a nightgown and love letter in his apartment. But years later, Minter wrote an autobiography admitting that her and her mother were both at Taylor's home that night, but still no hint of confession until Minter's mother suffered a heart attack, and one of the sins she confessed to on her deathbed was shooting William Desmond Taylor for making a pass at her daughter. Ooh, sounds like a crazy stage mom to me.
In our number 9 spot today, we have Elizabeth Wetlaufer. This messed up confession comes from a woman who is named Elizabeth. She was a nurse in Canada who was working at a long-term care home for elderly people. You know, some of the most vulnerable people out there aside from children. Well, this woman, who was supposed to have been dedicating her life to helping and caring for these people, instead just decided to do the exact opposite. Between 2007 and 2014, she confessed to killing 8 of her patients, and she also confessed to attempting to take the lives of 4 more. On October 5th, 2016, she sat down with Detective Constable Nathan Hergott of the Woodstock Police, where she was recorded giving her 2.5-hour confession, and man, she's just talking like she's describing what she had for lunch and not what terrible things she did for years.
I took something from you that was precious and it was taken too soon. I honestly believed at the time that God wanted me to do it, but I know now that's not true.
Elizabeth is Canada's most prolific female serial killer, which is truly a title no one should aspire to hold.
Coming in at number 8, this next one, Jeffrey Dahmer. You know who he is. Jeffrey Dahmer was responsible for one of the most gruesome criminal events in history, inspiring multiple creepy characters in horror films like Silence of the Lambs. Here is just one of the confessions he made during his jailhouse interview.
I had these obsessive desires and thoughts wanting to control them, possess them permanently.
And that's why you killed them?
Right. Right. Not because I was angry with them, not because I hated them, but because I wanted to keep them with me.
And it just gets creepier and creepier from there. What creeps me out the most about this confession is his calm, cool demeanor describing it. Like, he looks like someone you know, he looks like someone you could even get along with. He was self-aware enough to know what he was doing was wrong, but couldn't help himself. Also, how easy it was for him to turn a human being into an object in his mind. According to Dahmer, his desires began as daydreams and no one had any clue when things got worse because Dahmer was just a guy who worked at a chocolate factory.
In our number 7 spot today, we have Manuel Vela. In 2016, Manuel Vela took the life of his girlfriend, Katrina Rivera, who was pregnant with her child at the time. She was initially reported missing, but after taking police on a car chase, he ended up being arrested and her body was found inside of his car. There are some exceptionally disturbing details about this case that I cannot go into, but it definitely was an incredibly terrible situation. After the chase, he was taken into police custody where he continued to display strange and scary behavior, and he also ended up confessing to this crime.
So, do you think that you're possessed by the devil?
Me?
Yeah.
I'm the Antichrist.
Apparently this all happened because she had told him that she didn't want to be together anymore, which is truly so scary. It is abundantly clear that Manuel suffered from a multitude of mental health issues that clearly weren't being dealt with. Shortly after this terrible event, Manuel ended up taking his own life in his jail cell.
Coming in at number 6, the fact that this guy relates the crimes he did to fulfilling a lifelong dream is just one of the chilling confessions of Bernard Giles. He was arrested in 1974 after claiming the lives of 5 women by the age of 21 in Titusville, Florida. According to Giles, he had a very pleasant upbringing and unlike many serial killers, had a kind and normal life. But Bernard says that only he knew he had a dark desire as he got older. At the time of the attacks, he was also married and the father of a young daughter, though he says he doesn't put his family and his victims in the same category. He didn't want to know his victims' names simply because he saw them as objects and nothing more. In the interview with Morgan, he also goes on to say that 3 women saved their own lives because they started talking to him. By doing that, they became real, and because of that, he resisted the temptation. This was the same reason he didn't kill his wife, simply because he knew her. Bernard was just like everyone else, an electrician with a wife and a family. No one knew the monster that lied beneath until it was just too late.
In our number 5 spot today, we have Dennis Rader. The BTK killer, whose real name is Dennis Rader, was one of the worst serial killers from 1974 to 1991. He left taunting letters for police and newspapers where he described his crimes. Well, this turned out to be his demise because after an over 10-year hiatus, his huge ego couldn't handle shutting up, so he began communicating with the media again in 2004. This subsequently helped the investigation and led to his arrest in 2005. At his trial, he decided to describe his crimes in detail, but made absolutely no apology for it. Not like an apology would help, but he certainly displayed quite a level of psychopathic behavior.
There I realized that I didn't have a mask on or anything. They already could ID me, and made a decision to go ahead and put him down, I guess, or strangle him.
He ended up being sentenced to 10 consecutive life sentences with a minimum of 175 years, but no sentencing could ever truly be long enough. He remains at the El Dorado Correctional Facility where he will most likely stay for the rest of his life.
Coming in at number 4, what's the worst part about this interview is that it's actually being used as a sound clip on TikTok, which I think is awful personally. Whenever I come across someone using this dub, I'm always like, dude, you know where that's from, right? Like, you know. So, if you don't, here it is.
You murdered this man.
Yes.
You tortured him.
Of course.
There is no ambiguity, and there is nothing you want to... In court today, you said you're not here to pretend to be remorseful.
Of course not. Why would I do that?
Angela Simpson was responsible for the tragic death of 46-year-old Terry Neely in 2009. This is just part of her interview, and you can see the reason for why it has made it on this list. What Angela did to Neely was severe and inhuman, yet she shows absolutely no remorse when it comes to recounting her reasons. Thankfully, she is now facing life in prison, though apparently that's not the worst thing for her. According to Simpson, she has a lot of family in prison, so it's not the worst thing to be able to see them. The fact that someone could do what she did and not feel an ounce of regret is what makes this video a chilling addition to our top 10.
In our number 3 spot today, we have Kevin Davis. You guys, this truly is one of the most disturbing things I have ever heard in my entire life. Kevin Davis was 18 years old when he took the life of his own mother. It seems as though there was some sort of conversation beforehand that had made him upset, which is of course never a good enough reason to do something like this. There are details about this crime I wish that I could unlearn. In an interview with police, he gives them an extremely detailed account of basically everything that happened and seems to show absolutely no remorse. There's one thing he did that I truly cannot repeat, but you have to hear the way he describes it.
Yeah, I kicked out of the bed. Then I just, that was kind of silly, but then yeah, I just decided to reach in and kind of just...
Imagine committing a heinous crime and then going on to describe it as kind of silly. I truly have no words. During his trial, a doctor did testify to say that he had a personality disorder, but that he also fully knew the difference between right and wrong and knew that his crime was wrong and that there was no medical diagnosis that could justify his actions. Kevin is still in jail where he will most likely spend the rest of his life, but he will become eligible for parole in 2044.
Coming in at number 2, we're gonna talk about Edmund Kemper. Man, honestly, this whole dang interview, like how can one person be so evil and so helpful at the same time? If anyone has seen Mindhunter, that show led me to watch these interviews and man, absolutely mind-boggling. Ed Kemper is still alive and in prison today, serving time for the many vicious crimes he committed, taking the lives of 10 people before he eventually turned himself in 1973. It scares me to think whether someone even would have caught him. Part of the reason we had to include at least one of these interviews and confessions is because, as Mindhunter fans already know, he played a crucial role in building the criminal profiling unit with the FBI. His self-awareness and desire to relate his experiences made him the FBI's go-to guy when they had questions in the behavioral science unit. Kemper also excelled as far as an inmate could with an IQ over 145. Edmund Kemper still fascinates the public to this day and begs the question, can you ever really trust a serial killer?
In our number 1 spot today, we have Daniel Wozniak. In 2010, Daniel Patrick Wozniak had his wedding and honeymoon coming up that were of course going to cost a lot of money. Instead of getting a second job or simply just doing, I don't know, literally anything else in the entire world, he decided to do the unthinkable. He ended up taking the life of his neighbor Samuel Hare and his friend Juri Kabushi so that he could steal money from them. It is absolutely insane that this is the story behind the crime, but I cannot make this stuff up. He ended up confessing his crimes to police, and while it is nice to see someone try to show a sliver of remorse, his self-pity truly is just too much, which makes me believe that his remorse has much more to do with the remorse of being caught instead of actually committing the crime.
2 shots using my father's gun that I had.
And your motive behind killing Sam was?
Money and insanity.
Money and insanity. Okay.
That laugh is truly chilling, you guys. Daniel ended up being apprehended by US Marshals at his bachelor party 2 days before his wedding. The trial was very long, but in 2016, he was found guilty and ended up being sentenced to death. He remains at San Quentin State Prison.